When you step into the world of competitive Pokemon, you must accept the fact that this is not in-game. While pretty much anything you want can be used to topple the Elite Four, the same is certainly not true when going up against min-maxers with optimal Gliscor sets and whatnot. Not every Pokemon is going to be truly viable, meaning that it would be an optimal choice in at least some common situations for a serious competitive setting. However, this video is not about that. Yes, some Pokemon are always going to be outclassed by better ones, even if the outclassed Pokemon can technically do something that others can't, because the others just perform better. But that does not mean such Pokemon cannot be made to work, at least somehow. Even very bad Pokemon often have something they can do, and while this is not the mindset to have when you're trying to optimize everything in sight, we are playing Pokemon after all. It's good to dedicate yourself, and there's nothing wrong with taking it seriously at all. However, you can't be a serious Steve all the time either. Sometimes you just gotta try out a Pokemon you like. That's the original fun of Pokemon after all. It's why we picked it as our competitive game of choice. It's fun to see something be made work even if you know it's not the best or even good at all. The question is though, how do you make this fun stuff actually work so your good time Golduck doesn't just get instantly rolled by your opponent's better time Blissey? For this, we joined forces with Pinkacross, an expert at making just about anything work, who for this video has made and had success at high elo on Showdown Ladder with an OU team that has a Luxray. If you can make that work, anything's possible. But before we start, this video is sponsored by Factor. If you're anything like us at FSG, you probably lead a very busy life, whether it be work or other obligations. Who has time to add further stress to your day prepping, cooking, and cleaning when it comes to your food? And takeout is too expensive. Why not enjoy your food stress-free by ordering a box from Factor? All of Factor's meals are chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and come from a weekly menu of 35 options. They are pre-cooked and ready to eat right out the microwave after just 2 minutes. They may be pre-cooked, but they are never frozen, so they are way better than frozen TV dinners. In fact, Factor was kind enough to send us a keto box, which have all sorts of low-carb meals that are delicious. I especially love this creamy pesto pork chop and this Tex-Mex beef bowl with green chili cheese sauce. Man, that was really good. But keto isn't their only option. You get to choose from a bunch of different meal plans from Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and of course, veggie and vegan. But that's not all. Factor now has loads of snack options, including breakfast, smoothies, juices, and small bites. This apple beet ginger juice was great. And the best part, it's way cheaper than eating takeout. Don't fall into the overpriced takeout trap. With Factor, you get the convenience of takeout as it's delivered straight to your door, but at a much more affordable price. So what are you waiting for? Eat stress-free and head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code FalseSwipe50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. That's code FalseSwipe50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. And thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring this video.
Luxray is a bad Pokemon. This is no secret. It's a well-loved Pokemon that has been fairly well explored, and the resounding conclusion is that there's no reason to use Luxray in any generation of OU. There are much better electric types offensively and defensively. That being said, I can still make a pretty good team using it. The process for building good and bad Pokemon is the same. You record their strengths and weaknesses, then look for a suitable team archetype and a strong partner. Before I identify Luxray's strengths and weaknesses, I need to decide on a set. Every set has advantages and disadvantages that come with different strengths and weaknesses. I tested two, a defensive Intimidate set with Thunder Wave and a Guts Flame Orb set with Terra Normal Facade. After testing both, I preferred the Guts set. The Intimidate set was too passive and didn't have enough strong utility moves to justify using, but the Guts set sometimes did a decent job of breaking. I settled on Supercell Slam as my stab coverage, Ice Fang to hit Landorus and Gliscor, Facade for a strong all-around attack which could be boosted further by Terra Normal, and Trailblaze to boost my speed and threaten sweep. Now, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this set? The strengths include power, nothing being able to wall it long term, and solid coverage. The disadvantages though are significant. Poor speed even after a Trailblaze, with many Pokemon in OU being able to outspeed it at +1, mediocre bulk, the constant chip damage of Flame Orb, and perhaps worst of all, inconsistency. Luxray could be fantastic in some games and get several kills, or it could run into a defensive Great Tusk or Ting Lu and do almost nothing. With a list of weaknesses like that, I'd need to be very smart about the playstyle I selected. I looked at the issue of inconsistency first. There's no cure for it. Many players will try to construct a team that compensates for the inconsistency of a Pokemon by adding partners or lures to wear down its threats. This sometimes works, but more often than not, it's better to just accept the inconsistency and construct a team that's alright with a little inconsistency. The best playstyle for this is Hyper Offense. One style of Hyper Offense in particular jumped out to me: Grassy Terrain Hyper Offense. Rillaboom provides grassy terrain healing to mitigate Luxray's Flame Orb damage, while also weakening Earthquake. Rillaboom is also notably weak to a lot of birds, such as Moltres and Zapdos, that Luxray matches up well against. Furthermore, Hawlucha, a staple on grassy terrain hyper offense, appreciates having a strong breaker to soften up the opponent's physical walls. I added Serperior since it took advantage of grassy terrain and gave my team a special attacker, which is crucial on hyper offense to avoid losing to Zamazenta. I noticed my team was looking very weak against Darkrai, so I added a sweeper that helped a lot: Blaziken. Blaziken also loves grassy terrain since it heals off Flare Blitz damage with leftovers, grassy terrain, and Protect, while also gaining speed with Speed Boost. Now this team needs a suicide lead as the hyper offense style demands, and I didn't have a ground type. This made Iron Treads the perfect candidate, so I decided to use a Steel Beam set with Rapid Spin as a lead, which could double as a Raging Bolt answer if needed. I then tested my team on the ladder and found that, even with Encore Hawlucha and Serperior, my team was too weak to Zamazenta. I switched Blaziken for a Terra Grass Energy Ball Iron Moth, which functioned similarly to a special Blaziken, giving me a stronger matchup against Zamazenta and providing Serperior with additional support on the special side. This team performed quite well, allowing me to hover around top 50 in OU. It's not a great team. At the end of the day, it still has a Luxray, but it's pretty solid, and I could probably achieve top 20 or so on ladder if I spent a few more hours playing with it.
Reeling though we might be from seeing Luxray actually succeed in an OU environment, let's examine some takeaways. The first, to reiterate, is that the process of making a bad Pokemon work is much like making a good Pokemon work. You figure out what this focal point of your team is and what it can do, what its strengths are. If you give it opportunities, turns to do something, what is it going to do with them? Then once you have figured that out, you figure out how you're going to give it those opportunities in the first place. How is it switching into battle? Once you have that, you simply begin constructing the rest of the team to fill those needs. It's simplified, of course, but that is the process. And of course, the trial and error part where you edit your team as needed based on your experience, as demonstrated with Pinkacross's removal of his original Blaziken after testing and finding a Zamazenta weakness, replacing it with Iron Moth. Though he used this process for building a team with Luxray, this is just how good functional teams are built in general. Indeed, it could be Luxray, it could be something more standard like Dragapult. That standard poke could be the usual, or it can use a more unusual moveset. It could be something really appalling like Ledian. If you're good, you can make it work to a certain extent. Suffice to say, there tends to be a ceiling on this kind of thing. Even if Luxray is working as intended, it's only working so much. Now, there are some important things to remember here. First off, if this unusual thing you're trying is really, genuinely putting in work, largely off of its own accord, then congratulations! You've just discovered the next underrated Pokemon, or set, or what have you. It's important, though, to keep in mind that even though something might be doing decently or even pretty well, that doesn't mean it's going to be the best Pokemon for the job. Especially when using a lower tier breaker, people are often tricked into thinking it's good because it gets a lot of kills. If it's the only breaker on your team, of course it's gonna get a lot of kills. But would it get more kills if it were something else? To again take the example of Luxray, even if Luxray is actually doing pretty well for a Luxray, it is, well, still a Luxray. That is to say, you're using it because you want to use Luxray, not because it's the best for the job. Decent though Luxray might be doing against your expectations, it is not going to be optimal. Replacing it with a different electric type breaker like Iron Hands or Choice Specs Raging Bolt would almost certainly yield better results. Your team would certainly perform better if you chose a better Pokemon. However, if you're not trying to discover competitively underrated Pokemon and instead are just trying to make your favorites work, which is the idea behind this video anyway, is not really a concern. Potentially stumbling upon the next phase of the metagame is just a bonus. Second is to keep in mind what is really driving the success. Luxray isn't going to do the work itself. Pinkacross has to play incredibly well to get mileage out of it. This might seem obvious, but bear with us for a minute. Better Pokemon are generally easier to use for various reasons. They typically have strong moves that require little prediction and good defensive stats which mitigate the consequences of misplays. Worse Pokemon though require more finesse, and thus a lot of the success a Luxray type Pokemon has will be attributed to the skill a player has. There's only so far player skill will carry certain Pokemon, of course. Again, Ledion for the ultimate challenge, but that's important. It also depends who you're playing against and where. There's a reason this generally isn't seen in high-level tournament play. Trying to pull something like this against a really good player who knows what they're doing and is taking it seriously is usually a fast track to them making you look silly. You really have to pick your battles. It's also very crucial to note that alongside this Pokemon of choice, which is not at all meta, are 5 Pokemon which are indeed very standard and top tier. This is an important tried and true aspect of getting less effective Pokemon to work. In fact, some old players used to simply take a standard dependable team and switch out one member whenever they wanted to try something new, because they knew the foundation was good and thus would be useful to find out if this new Pokemon could do anything. This strong foundation is necessary to support the minimal utility this Pokemon is bringing to your team. But then you also realize a lot of the success of the team is also going to come from the fact that the other 5 Pokemon work so well together. Across many generations and metagames are plenty of 5 Pokemon cores that take on much of the metagame so well that the last slot becomes malleable, almost arbitrary, and almost doesn't matter whether that last slot is Tyranitar or Larvitar because the other 5 are so good. This is also present in Pinkacross's team. The other 5 Pokemon form a very strong hyper-offensive foundation, and they're going to set the stage for a lot of success as a result. They gave Pinkacross much more choice in taking on the metagame than Luxray. If you're winning with such a Pokemon, the Pokemon might be doing decently, but you're largely going to be winning because the team around it is so good that it lets the Pokemon sort of come along for the ride and get to pop up sometimes. It's sort of a bonus. In this vein, we can also mention the famous Pachirisu that won 2014 Worlds. This is not quite the same thing because the Pachirisu was chosen for its specific anti-metagame talents, but what is very applicable here is the fact that this Pachirisu was supported by 5 of the very best, most popular and reliable Pokemon in the meta. That is why Pachirisu was able to succeed, because this 5 Pokemon foundation was such good support that its talents could be used. This is the generally good rule of thumb whether you want to use the Luxrays and Ledions of the world, or if you want to try something that has genuine potential for its own merits. If you start loading up on too much of that kind of stuff, the team as a whole suffers, and thus your desired Pokemon won't be able to function. It's also worth mentioning that once you reach a certain level of metagame understanding, you can identify extremely specific niches you want fulfilled to target something either needed by your team or present in the metagame at large, so you can potentially bridge the gap more effectively between wanting to use something for fun and genuinely finding a role for it. The tactics learned from making something work for fun and very useful in the eternal search for actually decent underrated Pokemon too. There is a rich history of this. Players messing around with Pokemon they liked only to find out that there was something real there, eventually demonstrating it and legitimizing Pokemon previously dismissed as gimmicks or not worthwhile at all. Here's an amazing example across multiple generations that originated with people wanting to use a Pokemon just because, specifically the first 3. Moltres. It was previously thought to be a gimmick in all 3. In Gen 1, it was an NU Pokemon previously thought of as a gimmick to use on gimmicky teams that committed the ultimate sin and dropped Tauros, thereby ensuring they would never rise above gimmick status. However, Moltres is ferociously powerful, 30% burn rate Fire Blast, tied for strongest special move in the game in conjunction with agility, the chip enabling Fire Spin, and the strongest Hyper Beam of the 3 legendary birds gave it a serious niche in OU. In Gen 2, Moltres was seen as a similarly gimmicky BL. Without much it could seriously do against the metagame at large, until the player base realized just how insanely strong the Charcoal Sunny Day Rest Talk set was, as its boosted Fire Blast 2-hit KOing Snorlax of all things with chip damage, while Sunny Day knocked the legendary Electrix's Thunder down to 50%, giving its team excellent utility as well. It didn't even need to Sunny Day up for its Fire Blast to knock the stuffing out of several metagame staples like Cloyster, Exeggutor, and Steelix, which are often paired together. This gave it a serious role as a wall breaker in OU, especially since its use of Rest Talk to keep itself unafraid of Toxics and to give itself more Fire Blast PP also meant it was an amazing check to not just Exeggutor, but Nidoking too. In Gen 3, Fire Stat wasn't really seen as too useful either, given the presence of Tyranitar, Suicune, Salamence, Aerodactyl, and Blissey, and Moltres was thought of as, you guessed it, a gimmick. An interesting BL Pokemon, but not more. Once again, just a Sunny Day machine, until players ignored the sun and focused on just how nasty Moltres could be in the tier's default state of sand, unleashing fury on the tier's many top tier common fire weaks who often stacked together. Skarmory, Jirachi, Metagross, Magneton, Celebi, Heracross, and its switch-ins were generally not at all fans of the nasty Will-O-Wisp that accompanied it. Have fun throwing your Tyranitar, Salamence, or Aerodactyl into that. Moltres became an excellent Pokemon to throw on Sand Spikes teams, so much so that Moltres Spikes eventually became its own bona fide team style, and so much so that Moltres actually rose to OU. We've mentioned Moltres' rise in the first 3 generations on this channel before, but we're briefly touching on it again here because its serious use arose from generations of some players messing around with the legendary bird they liked. It's got small niches in Gens 4 and 5 OU too, for that matter. Maybe it'll rise up more in the future there because someone felt like messing with it. Whether you're going to find the next Moltres or you're looking to make a name for Butterfree and Dustox, if you really want to just try a Pokemon for fun without any expectation, you should absolutely go and do that. Even the staunchest human calculator RBY players sometimes cut loose and bust out something like Seadra just for the heck of it. We hope this video has inspired you to go out and do so and has provided you with an idea of how to do it. Best of luck! Thanks for watching, everyone, and thank you so much to Pinkacross for guest starring in this video. You should really go check them out. He's really good at team building and playing Pokemon in general. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And in the comments, I want to know, what do you think of the video? Is there a favorite that you messed around with? And if so, how did it go? Whatever it is, let us know in the comments. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos. And thank you to everyone else watching as well. And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Bingleton, Daniel Isbeast, Dr. Mint, Funky, Glitcherton, Gustavo, Hal, Nurse Jake, Jack G, Lord of the Rabbit, Pretzel SP, Raven Daytona Ring, Ray Ray, Skylaria, Soares and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, and Stoneface Colin for their major support of our videos. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.